Welcome back to the deep dive. It is genuinely good to have you here with us.
It's great to be here.
And I want to start by extending a very specific, warm welcome to everyone listening to this on the Funeral Channel Network podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
We are so thrilled to be slotted into your listening lineup today, whether you're on the road between services, working in the office, or, just taking a moment to decompress.
And honestly, considering who's tuning in, people who likely deal with the sort of mechanics of legacy and loss and memory every single day, I think today's topic is going to resonate on a frequency we don't usually hit.
I think so, too.
We're looking at something that is, it's literally part of the furniture in the death care industry, yet it's almost invisible in terms of its actual potential.
We're talking about the funeral guest book.
We are.
And I can almost hear the collective sigh from the back of the room. A guest book, really. It's a list of names. It's stationary. But the deep dive we're taking today is based on this fascinating source material titled Legacy Archives, Safeguarding Memorial Memories for Future Generations. And let me tell you, this document is, it's aggressive in the best possible way. It completely dismantles the idea of the guest book as just a sign-in sheet.
It really does. It frames the traditional guest book as a missed opportunity of massive proportions. The source material argues that for centuries, we've treated this object as an administrative tool.
A roll call.
Exactly, a roll call. You walk in, you sign, you sit down. But the core argument here is that we need to pivot. We need to stop seeing it as a single-day artifact.
Right, something that serves a purpose only on the day of the funeral.
And start treating it as an enduring family archive.
That phrase, enduring family archive, that's the anchor for this whole deep dive. Because if we're honest, the current life cycle of a physical guest book is, it's a bit depressing.
It really is.
The service ends, the flowers die, the family goes home, the casserole dishes are washed and returned, and the book.
It usually ends up in the box of doom.
The box of doom. We all have one of those. It's that plastic bin in the attic or the cardboard box shoved in the back of the closet under the winter coats.
Exactly. And that brings us to the central tension of today's discussion. We're asking a really big question here.
We are.
What happens to the memory of a human being once the immediate grief subsides? How do we move from just, recording attendance to safeguarding a life for a great-grandchild who won't be born for another 20 years?
That's the real stakes raiser, isn't it?
It is. The source material makes a really compelling case that we're relying on a methodology, physical paper and ink, that is, it's biologically and physically destined to fail.
That's a strong statement, destined to fail.
It is, but it's true. We love the tactility of the physical world. We love holding a prayer card. But from an archival standpoint, it's a nightmare.
Sure. Okay, so let's dig into that nightmare because that's really the focus of section 1 of our breakdown today.
Yeah.
The fragility of the physical.
Right.
Because I think we romanticize the old dusty book. We think of it as permanent because it's heavy and maybe it's bound in leather. But the source material hits us with some, cold chemistry.
It's just basic material science.
Yeah.
Paper is organic. Unless you're using high-grade, acid-free archival paper, which, let's be honest, most standard funeral guest books bought off the shelf are not.
At all.
It's going to degrade. It contains lignin, it yellows, it becomes brittle over time. The ink itself interacts with the fibers, and it starts to bloom or fade.
I was just looking at some of my own family documents recently, stuff from the 1960s, and the ballpoint pen ink hasn't just faded. It's almost evaporated. You have to hold it at an angle to the light just to see the indentation of where the name used to be.
Exactly that. And that's assuming the environment is perfect. But our homes aren't museums.
Yeah.
We don't have humidity-controlled vaults. We have basements that flood. We have attics that bake in the summer heat. Dampness invites mold. UV light from a window bleaches the text right off the page.
It's a hostile environment for a document.
It is. But the source material points out that the biggest threat isn't even the chemistry of the paper. It's the logistics of the modern family unit.
You're referring to the box problem again.
That's always the box problem.
Yeah.
Think about the modern family. People move houses every 7 years on average in the U.S.
Right.
Every time you move, things get purged. Or things get consolidated. A box gets labeled grandma's stuff.
Yeah.
Then 20 years later, you pass away. Your kids find the box. They didn't really know grandma. To them, it's just a heavy box of old paper.
And this is the part of the source that really, really shook me. The concept of the single point of failure. A physical object can only be in one place at one time. If I have the guest book, my cousin in Seattle doesn't. If my house burns down, the history. It's gone.
And That is the tragedy. It's not just losing a book, it is losing the context. The source describes this heartbreaking scenario where heirlooms are discarded not out of malice, but just out of ignorance.
They just don't know what it is.
They don't know. A great-grandchild sees a dusty book full of names they don't recognize. They toss it. And in that 1 second, the social proof of that ancestor's existence, all the evidence that they were loved by a community, it's erased.
That erasure is what we're trying to fight against. The idea that an heirloom could be discarded just because its significance wasn't communicated is, well, it's terrifying.
It is.
It really highlights the mission of this deep dive. We aren't just talking about digitization for the sake of convenience or being high-tech. We represent a channel that cares about history, about family. This is about the survival of memory itself.
Precisely. And that pushes us right into section 2 of this, reframing this whole concept into a legacy archive.
Yes.
The source material is asking us to decouple the memory from the physical location.
I love that term, legacy archive. It sounds so much more substantial than guest book. But let's define that shift. What does that actually mean?
This is the paradigm shift. An archive implies curation.
Here.
It implies intention. A guest book is passive. You put it on a podium and you hope people sign it.
Right.
An archive is active. The source defines this shift as creating a social and emotional footprint of a life.
It sounds a bit buzzwordy, social and emotional footprint, but when you actually break it down, it makes perfect sense. It's about utility.
Yeah.
If the goal is to remember someone, the method of memory needs to be accessible.
Right. And this is where the digital argument wins on pure logistics.
Yeah.
Permanence versus decay.
Okay.
A digital file, a JPEG of a signature, or a text string of a message, it doesn't yellow, it doesn't tear. Technically, a digital file looks exactly the same in 50 years as it does today, assuming, and we will get to this big asterisk later,
Yes, there's always an asterisk.
assuming it's maintained properly.
But the source really emphasizes that this permanence isn't accidental. You have to treat it like an archive. You can't just, upload it to the cloud and assume it'll be there forever without you doing anything.
Exactly. You have to be a steward. But the potential for resilience is so much higher. You can duplicate a digital file infinitely. You can back it up. You can store copies on a hard drive, on a cloud server, and on a USB stick in a safe deposit box.
You can't do that with a physical book.
You can't. You can't have the original physical book in 3 places at once.
That is a great point. And that leads directly to the issue of accessibility, which I think is one of the most practical benefits for families today.
For sure.
Families are so spread out now. I mentioned my cousin in Seattle earlier. In the old model, if he wants to see who was at our grandfather's funeral, he has to fly to my house.
Which he is not going to do.
He is definitely not going to do that, no.
So the memory just remains dormant, sits on a shelf.
Yeah.
The digital archive, on the other hand, it activates the memory. It removes all that friction. The source gave a really beautiful use case for this. Imagine a grandchild doing family research decades from now. Or, and I love this one, imagine a family member who is getting married or having a baby, and in that moment, they want to feel a connection to a grandparent who passed away.
That's where the accessibility becomes emotional, not just logistical.
That's it.
If that grandchild wants to know who their grandfather was, they don't have to dig through a dusty attic or ask an aunt to mail a book that she can't find anyway. They can just log in, they can see the messages, they can feel that connection during a huge milestone event. It keeps the memory active rather than dormant in storage.
It effectively removes the friction from remembering. If I have to go take a box out of the garage to remember someone, I might not do it. If I can click a link, I'm there in a second.
No, I want to pivot to what is actually inside these archives. Because this is where the Funeral Channel audience might be rolling their eyes thinking, okay, great, a digital list of names, a spreadsheet.
Right. I can do that with Excel.
Exactly. But Section 3 focuses on preserving voices, and the source material is adamant that we are not just digitizing signatures.
No, and this is where the emotional impact really scales up. A signature is it's a legal mark. It says, I was here. It doesn't say how I felt.
That's a great distinction.
The source distinguishes between the figurative voice, the unique phrasing, the tone of a written story, and the literal voice.
So multimedia.
Multimedia is the game changer. We're biological creatures. We're wired to respond to sound and to faces. The source talks about creating a sense of
The
presence.
sense of presence?
Yeah, there's a profound neurological difference between reading a quote that says Uncle Joe had a booming laugh and actually clicking a file and hearing that laugh.
Oh, just think about the difference in impact there.
Wow.
It's incomparable.
It is.
Hearing a voice or seeing a smile in a video creates an intimacy that formal records simply cannot convey. We often look at genealogy charts.
Mm-hmm.
Names, dates, birth, death, they're so dry, they're skeletons.
Right. They tell you that the person lived, but not how they lived.
Exactly. The digital archive, with that multimedia capability, provides the emotional context. It puts the flesh on the skeleton. It allows future generations to not just know about the ancestor, but to feel like they have, in a way, met them.
That is a beautiful way to put it. It's the difference between data and experience.
Yeah.
And speaking of experience, the source brings up another fascinating point about whose experiences are actually recorded. This gets into the idea of democratizing memory.
This is section 4 of our outline, and honestly, this is the deep psychological stuff. I call it the Rashomon effect of funerals. Everyone has a different story.
Oh, this is a huge one. In any family, history is usually passed down through what the source calls selective stories.
Oh, I know exactly what that means. It's the same stories that get told at Thanksgiving every single year.
Yes. And they're usually told by the same 2 or 3 people. The loud uncle, the family matriarch. They control the narrative.
They do.
And over time, those few stories, they become the only version of the person that survives. It becomes this simplified, polished version of history.
Right. The saint version or the grumpy version. It just lacks nuance. So how does the digital guestbook change that?
Well, it invites input from everyone. It creates a 360-degree view of the person.
A 360-degree view.
Yeah, you aren't just getting the family's perspective anymore. You're getting the perspective of the neighbor who chatted with them over the fence every morning.
Or the coworker who sat in the next cubicle for 10 years.
Or the childhood friend who hasn't seen them in decades but remembers who they were at age 10. That's a perspective the immediate family might never have had.
I love that. It's like crowdsourcing a biography.
Ideally, yes. It democratizes the memory because it gives equal weight to all these different contributors. The result is a collective memory that is nuanced and complex. Future generations don't just see the mom or dad version of the person.
No.
They see how the person was experienced by the entire community.
That is so important because we are different people to different people. Who I am to my kids is completely different from who I am to my boss or to my old college roommate.
Precisely. And if we only preserve the family view, we lose all those other facets of a person. The source also connects this to cultural continuity, which I thought was fascinating.
Yes, tell us more about that. How does a digital book support cultural identity?
Well, think about something as simple as language. In a physical book, you might hesitate to write in your native language if you know the immediate family primarily speaks English. You might feel constrained or like you're being difficult.
You want to be polite.
You want to be polite.
Yeah.
In a digital space, though, people can write messages in their native languages easily. They can reference specific cultural rituals or shared traditions that might not be known to everyone. It preserves the cultural context of the deceased's life.
So it's not just he was a good man. It's preserving the specific way his community mourns and celebrates him, in their own words.
Right. It creates a link to heritage that goes way beyond just the dates and names on a family tree. It captures the flavor of the culture that surrounded that person.
And for a grandchild growing up, perhaps more assimilated or, removed from that culture,
Yeah.
seeing those messages in the original language or reading about those specific traditions provides a bridge back to their roots.
It's a living connection to their own history.
That bridge concept is huge. And it leads us right to the next big theme in Section 5, the time capsule effect. I know we have listeners who fit our learner profile. They're curious. They want to know the so what. Why does this matter 50 years from now?
It matters because of what the source calls contemporaneous reflections.
Okay, that is a fancy phrase. Break that down for us.
It just means reflections that were recorded at the same time as the event. The messages in a guest book are written in the raw moment of loss. They're immediate. They're unfiltered.
As opposed to me sitting down 20 years later and trying to remember what I felt.
Exactly. A memory written 20 years later is what psychologists call reconstructed history. Your brain has edited it.
Oh, for sure.
You've smoothed over the rough edges. You've viewed it through the lens of everything that has happened since. But a guest book entry, That is a perfect window into the lived relationship in real time.
It's unfiltered emotion.
It is. It captures how people felt, not just what they knew. And the source describes these books as emotional time capsules. For a descendant, reading those raw, immediate expressions of grief and love fosters a deep sense of empathy.
It reminds them that their ancestors were, real people with real messy feelings.
It reminds them that grief, love, and loss are shared human experiences across generations. It connects them on an emotional level, not just a biological one. You realize, oh, my great-grandmother felt this profound loss just like I feel loss. It humanizes the past.
That is really powerful. It validates their own capacity for grief. Oh, I feel this way, and they felt this way too. It connects the human experience across time. But, and here's the big pivot, none of this happens by magic. We have to talk about the responsibility side of things.
We absolutely do. We have to pivot to the serious side of digital management, Section 6, ethical stewardship.
Right.
The source is very clear on this. Digital archives are not magic. And there is a myth we need to bust right now, the myth of set it and forget it.
I think we are all guilty of this with our digital lives. We upload a photo album to Facebook and just assume it's safe forever.
And that is a really dangerous assumption. Digital archives are not self-sustaining. Platforms change. Companies go out of business. File formats become obsolete. Remember Flash.
Oh, don't remind me.
If you want this to be a legacy for the future, you have to practice active, ethical stewardship.
The source actually provides a checklist for this, which I found super helpful. What are some of those key stewardship questions we should be asking ourselves?
Okay, so the first one is simple. Are the links still active? You need to check them periodically. A year from now, 5 years from now.
That makes sense.
Second, are the privacy settings appropriate? This is a big one.
Yep.
Families change and feelings about privacy change. Maybe immediately after the funeral, you wanted everything to be public as a tribute. 10 years later, maybe you want to tighten that circle to just family.
And the third one I saw was, does the platform still align with your family's values?
Right. Platforms evolve. The place where you're storing these precious memories, you need to make sure it's still a place you trust, that it hasn't, pivoted to something you're not comfortable with.
This also touches on really deep ethics of privacy and consent. Just because we can share everything digitally doesn't mean we should.
Absolutely. The source highlights that families must decide who has access now and who gets access in the future. And crucially, we have to respect consent regarding photos and videos.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we need to ensure memories are preserved with dignity, not exposed indiscriminately. A candid photo of someone that was funny and loving at the wake might not be something you want permanently searchable on the open internet for the next 100 years.
That's a really good point. Context is everything.
Exactly. It's about being a guardian of the memory, a curator. The source mentions the funeral program site as an example of a resource that really emphasizes this, thinking about long-term guardianship, not just the initial creation of the memorial.
So it's a shift in mindset.
It's a huge shift in mindset from making a web page to curating a museum.
I like that, curating a museum. So practically speaking, for the listeners who are thinking, okay, I'm sold on digital, but I still love the physical book, what is the best practice here? This is section 7. Best practices, integration, and redundancy.
The best practice is a hybrid approach. And the source is really clear here. This is not about destroying physical books. We're not saying paper is bad.
Thank goodness. I still want something to hold.
And you should have it. Many families now integrate the two. They take all the digital content, the messages, the stories, the photos, and print them into beautiful, physical memorial books. This gives you the absolute best of both worlds.
So you get the breadth and the searchability of digital.
And the tactile comfort of the physical object. It's about integration, not replacement. But the technical advice from the source is crystal clear on one thing. Redundancy is key.
Redundancy. In the tech world, that's a golden rule.
It is, because no single format is immune to change or disaster. Paper burns, hard drives crash, cloud services can close down. The strategy has to be download the files, back them up, and store the copies in multiple different locations.
So have the physical book on the shelf, have the digital archive online, have a copy on an external hard drive in your desk.
And maybe have another copy in the cloud or on a flash drive in a safe deposit box.
Exactly.
You spread the risk. If one format fails, the memory survives in another.
There's one last piece of the puzzle here that I think is the most easily overlooked. We can build the most perfect, redundant, high-tech archive in the world, but if no one knows, it's there.
It's useless. It's completely useless. The source calls this teaching the future. An archive is only valuable if people know it exists and how to access it.
This brings us right back to the box problem, but in a digital sense. A password no one knows is just as bad as a locked box in a landfill.
It is. The actionable advice here is to include references to the archive in your will, in your family records. Share stories about the book's creation. Tell your kids, tell your grandkids, hey, there is this place online where all these stories about Grandpa live.
You have to encourage the younger members to explore it.
Yes, you have to contextualize it so it is used, not just stored. Make it a living part of the family history, not some secret garden that gets lost when you pass away.
That is such a crucial takeaway. It's not just about preservation, it's about communication and transmission.
Precisely. That's the final step.
Well, we have covered a massive amount of ground today. I feel like we have really unpacked this whole idea. We started with the image of that fragile, lonely guest book sitting on a podium, vulnerable to time and the elements.
And we moved all the way to this vision of a robust multimedia archive, a collective memory that captures the voices, the laughter, and the tears of an entire community.
We talked about how this shifts the focus from just a list of names to a true emotional inheritance. It really is about preserving meaning, not just messages.
That is the core of it. Meaning.
Before we let our listeners go, I want to leave them with a final thought. We always like to end with something a little provocative, something for you to chew on.
I think the provocative thought here is about intentional legacy. Decisions about memorialization, about guest books, about archives are almost always made during a time of acute grief.
Oh, absolutely. You're in a fog.
You're in a fog.
Yeah.
You're just trying to get through the day. You're checking boxes on a list the funeral director gave you.
You are.
But the source reminds us that those small decisions made in that moment of grief have an enormous impact on generations, decades later. So the challenge is to pause, even in that difficult time, and ask a simple question. What would we want our grandchildren to know?
That is a powerful question.
By asking that one question, we reframe a simple task like buying a guest book into an investment in memory. We aren't just planning a funeral anymore. We are designing how we will be remembered.
That is a beautiful place to end. We are designing how we will be remembered. Thank you so much for breaking all of this down with me today.
It really has been a pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you to our listener for joining this deep dive on the Funeral Channel Network podcast. It has been a privilege to share this time with you. We'll see you on the next deep dive.